Hi, fellow 135ers. So for our project, we decided to do adult T-cell leukemia and lymphoma. And what we decided to make was a brochure that could be given to a patient possibly diagnosed with ATLL to give them a brief synopsis of what the disease is, what the treatment is like, and essentially what the status quo is in regards to how this disease is being addressed, both in the scientific and non-scientific community. So a little bit of background on what ATLL is. ATLL is a rare and aggressive type of mature T-cell non-Hodgkin lymphoma, meaning that it develops from white blood cells known as T cells, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And this particular disease was first identified in 1977 in Japan. Onset of this particular cancer is thought to be linked to the infection of human T lymphotropic virus 1, or HTLV1. And this is a virus that's similar to AIDS or HIV. And for this reason, ATLL is most prevalent in areas where infection with this particular virus is common. And that happens to be areas in southwestern Japan, the Caribbean, West Africa, Northeast Iran, as well as parts of South and Central America. And it's rarely found in Western countries like Australia and North America, where the virus is not as present. And this little figure right here gives you a little idea of where this virus is most commonly found. So this particular cancer can actually present as various different types. It can be a leukemia, a lymphoma, or both, meaning it can either be found in the circulating blood system, or it can be found in the lymph nodes, or both, as I mentioned earlier. And in addition to that, they can also be divided into four main subgroups. The cancer can be lymphomatous, chronic, smoldering, or acute. So based on data from 2001 to 2015, it was found that the incident rate for this cancer in areas where the virus is more common, such as Japan, was about 60 per 100,000 HTLV1 virus carriers. And that basically means that about 2 to 5% of people who are infected with the virus will end up developing ATLL at some point in their life. And currently, there's no determinate way to identify who infected with this virus will end up developing adult T-cell leukemia.
So, the treatment for ATLL is in line with many of the other leukemias and lymphomas, specifically non Hodgkin's lymphoma. So, generally, the first line of treatment will be chemotherapy. So, there are a few types of chemotherapy that are suggested for ATLL. So, CHOP is an infusion given over about 3 hours, and then you have a steroid pill that you take over the next 5 days. It is the least aggressive of the treatments, and it will have the side effects that are normally associated with cancer, like hair loss, nausea, constipation, and it can cause fertility issues, especially in women, along with other assorted side effects from the steroid or from the individual drugs. And then there's CHOP with etoposide, and that is the same thing, but with the addition of another chemotherapy drug, so it becomes slightly more aggressive of treatment. And then another type of treatment is dose-adjusted EPOC, and that is usually given in a hospital over 5 days, and the infusion is drawn out longer. So this can cause a higher risk of infection, especially, and in addition to the other side effects. And then the last type of treatment is hyper CVAD, but this treatment is usually for the most aggressive types, and it has two sets of alternating drugs that are given over a longer period of time with um, with lower doses for that time, and then traded off with a different set of drugs for the next 3 weeks. So, depending on how your body reacts to it, you may or may not have to stay in the hospital for the entire time of your infusion for the hyper CVAD part. So, this is the most serious one and will likely cause the most interruption to your day to day life.
To add on more onto prognosis of these individuals, for a 4 year life expectancy, it's found that depending on the type of adult T cell leukemia or lymphoma that you have a differing rate of life expectancy. So for smoldering adult T cell leukemia and lymphoma, you're found to have a 62% chance of surviving over a 4 year span. For chronic, that's 27%. And for lymphoma and acute, it's the same at 5%. So, depending on which subtype you are diagnosed with, the treatment may vary based on what your physician would tell you on how to best address whichever type of cancer that you have.
Okay, so now I'm going to go into a little bit about the importance of clinical trials. And like Ashley mentioned, in terms of treatment options, um, right now the treatment options include more generalized chemotherapies that address a range of T-cell lymphomas. So this kind of highlights the importance of more targeted treatments, and this is the goal of the clinical trials. So two of the current ongoing clinical trials that are important to address different aspects of ATLL. So in the first one I'm going to talk about, this one is an interventional treatment. So the researchers in this study are using an antibody that they engineered that binds to a specific protein called the CCR4 protein that's overexpressed in T cells of these patients. And this provides a way to more specifically target the T cells of individuals with ATLL. And a little bit about how it works mechanistically is that when this antibody binds to the CCR4 protein, it triggers a process called antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity. And this is basically a process where when the antibody binds, it tags the cell to recruit immune cells that can lead to that can kill the cancerous T cell. And phase 2 of this clinical trial has showed really promising results as patients have shown a more than 50% decrease in their lymph node masses. But further work is still being done to address how this therapy can work in combination with other cytotoxic drugs. And another important clinical trial is an observational study. So in this study, researchers are just generally trying to gain more information about individuals infected with the HTLV1 virus to better inform research practices like the initial clinical trial I was talking about. So just to kind of gather more information about how ATLL is developed from HTLV1. And just in general, these clinical trials just highlight the importance of patient participation in order to develop a more targeted treatment.
Moving on to causes and mechanisms. So cancer is a disease that starts in our cells when instructions start to get mixed up and cells begin to grow and divide uncontrollably. And as we know, leukemia is a cancer in blood-forming tissues such as lymph nodes or bone marrow. And however, in adult T-cell leukemia, cancer is caused by an exogenous factor. It's caused by the human T-cell leukemia virus type 1, HTLV1. And roughly 2/3 of the people who develop this cancer have the leukemia version, while the other third have the lymphomatous form. But not everyone who gets infected with the virus actually ends up developing adult T-cell leukemia. In fact, only 1 in 20 individuals roughly who have HTLV1 will develop adult T-cell leukemia. And how the virus spreads is from person-to-person contact through either breastfeeding, shared contaminated equipment, needles, or infected blood transfusions or organ transplants. But like I was talking about earlier, many of the individuals who have HTLV1 are healthy carriers of the virus, and they don't actually end up developing cancer. And this is likely due to the fact that the cancer develops due to viral oncogenes associated with the virus that lead to transformation to cancer. Specifically, it was documented that we need roughly 4 to 6 driver mutations in order for a hyperplasia caused by the virus to develop into a full-blown cancer. And some of the viral proteins that are critically implicated in this are the viral protein TAX, which alters certain genes that controls how cells divide. And it forces them basically to divide over and over again by hijacking the NF-κB pathway and the AP1 proliferative pathway. And what it does is it bypasses the cell cycle checkpoints as well as the DNA damage and apoptosis checkpoints. And finally, the origin of the adult T-cell leukemia cells is somewhat unknown, but recent data suggest that it is actually regulatory T cells, Treg cells, based on unusual FOXP3 expression in a part of tumor cells. And FOXP3 is a transcription factor in Treg cells.
Thanks everyone for watching our presentation on adult T-cell leukemia and lymphoma. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.